Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I've been looking forward all day to this just because it's such a great group of panel. I appreciate all your time and contributions. Mr. Fain, it's great to see you again. Appreciate all the work that you did to bring up a 4-day week and the negotiations, but I'm going to hold off on yours just because I have to start with Dr. Schor, who was an undergraduate student while I was a graduate student, and somehow she hasn't aged, whereas I have, and I think there's an injustice there that needed to be pointed out. But appreciate all your work and research over all these years on the lives people lead in the various types of jobs. You talk a little bit about the different ways that people have a shorter work week, taking part off every day or a whole day time each month off. What are some of the pros, and again, concisely, because I got several questions, but pros and cons on this?
Yes, the majority in our studies, and thank you, by the way, really wonderful to see you, are doing full days off. So over 90% of our studies are doing full days off, and that seems to be a much more popular way to do this than shorter daily hours, although there's a little bit of variation. One thing we looked at in our studies was whether or not having 3 consecutive days had a bigger impact on well-being, and we were surprised that it doesn't. In some of them, people are taking those Wednesdays off to get a break in the middle of the week.
Interesting. And better or worse for small businesses?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Over 70% of the businesses in our U.S. and Canada sample have fewer than 25 employees. So I think this is proving to be an especially appealing thing for small businesses. And it may have to do with higher levels of stress that they're seeing among their employees. I mean, one of the things we're seeing is the small number of companies who are discontinuing. We're trying to figure out what's common among them. And so far, the only thing we can see is they're not achieving the same levels of well-being increase that the ones who don't stop are.
Right. Interesting. When I was mayor, when I first became mayor of Denver in 2003, we had the worst budget recession ever, and one of the stopgap measures we did was we compelled all city employees to take Friday afternoons off, unpaid. Needless to say, that was not perfect. No one likes to, when you're on a tight budget, to have to make your budget bounce at the end of the month. But people really liked it, and to this day, that's to give people that Friday off every week. We saw an increase in sales at local restaurants, which was interesting, and other retail sales went up. So there's some accessory benefit. Mr. Leland, I'm going to skip past you, although I can't tell you how excited I am to have the chief vision officer for Kickstarter, because I admire so much of what you all have done. I want to go to Dr. Vittert, just because I found compelling that she was, in 2018, the coolest person in Scotland, and that her television show, Liberty's Great American Cookbook, which is it still showing in Scotland?
It is.
Still showing in Scotland. It was something.
I need all the viewers I can get.
Yes. Well, we want to make sure we don't miss to promote that, because when I was the mayor and working through that, and I looked this up last night when I saw, because Vittert's not a common name, and it's interesting that she's sitting to the left of Mr. Leland, because her brother Leland Vittert was a journalist with an internationally successful and admired journalist with Fox back. He was based in Denver when I first became mayor. So he's schooled me he educated me within the School of Hard Knocks on how to think about these things. Anyway, Dr. Vittert, one argument in favor of implementing a 32-hour work week is that these tech advancements like AI are going to make such a dramatic increase. How realistic do you think that is, and when would those productivity increases begin to show or begin to have a benefit?
I think the issue that we see here is people use the word AI and don't necessarily know what that means. And that as someone who works in this space, we don't know yet what abilities AI is going to give us, or machine learning. I mean, we're still trying to figure out what those words even really mean. So to say that there's going to be this explosion of productivity and wealth, we just don't know yet. And no one's saying, or I'm certainly not saying, it's above my pay grade, that people shouldn't share in that. But mandating a reduction to a 32-hour work week is not the way to do that.
Got it. I hear that. And Mr. King, same question to you, because I think you've probably got a little more gone into AI on a little bit of deeper level. What's your feeling on that?
A tremendous opportunity for everybody, absolutely. But the issue of distribution of wealth, the wealth dividend, Senator, from AI, I mean, that's what we're really talking about here. I would point the committee's attention to Chart 1 in my testimony. Productivity and compensation have tracked similarly for decades. Economists agree on that. Now, there have been gaps in different industries. There's been time lags, Senator, but the market will solve this issue. Mr. Fain will negotiate hard for 32 hours, I'm sure. Others will advocate for 32 hours. We have examples that we see work, but let the market decide this. Don't have Congress impose this on employers or employees.
Got it. Great. And then, since I can go over just for a minute, Mr. Payne, when you were negotiating and introduced this notion of a 32-hour work week, I mean, you've talked firsthand with the large employers and large group of employees. It ultimately wasn't included in the final contract, but what were some of the concerns, not the unique concerns that we haven't heard before that were raised by the employers, and what do you think it would take to get those employers to move? I think in terms of the 36-hour work week that we tried when I was mayor of the city, it's really like roughly a 10% pay raise is the way to think about doing something like that. The level of appreciation of people having that Friday afternoon off was palpable. You could feel it. Anyway, what was your sense on that?
Well, I think it's just obviously, I think it's just a fear of change, of something, doing something different. I mean, you look at, there are studies that have been done when workers, especially factory workers in manufacturing, when they work anything after 10 hours typically they're not as productive. It just, the wear and tear that you go throughout the day, there have been a lot of studies done on that productivity actually drops off. So there are benefits to shorter working hours. And as a person who stood on a line, as an 18-year-old, I could vividly remember putting a part on a transmission. I would sit there. It's monotonous work, doing it over and over and over. And literally after 2 hours of that, you're just, your mind's wandering off. And imagine doing that for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are a lot of benefits to having some semblance of work-life balance, but unfortunately, with the advances in technology, the companies choose to eliminate jobs and squeeze more and more people, the remaining people, working more and more hours, and that just doesn't work.
Right, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I've got many more questions which I'll throw in writing, but I'll yield back to the chair. Thank you all again for being here.